Good evening, or at least it's evening over here from in the Czech Republic. So we are doing okay. How are you in sunny California? Or at least I hope it's sunny there.
Well, I'm actually in
Sorry,
Washington, where it's quite gray and
so it's
gloomy.
rainy in Washington. Okay, here it's about around freezing temperature, give or take. Yeah,
Yeah, here in Washington, we don't, at least on the western side, we don't get freezes very often. So, yeah, we kind of are just dark and gloomy.
yeah.
So, before I butcher it, sir, how do I pronounce your name? Because I'm willing to bet I do not know how to say it.
Okay, my name is Jan Kotouc, and Jan is easy. It's Jan. Okay, and kotouc it's divided as kot as something you sleep on, and ouch as when you get hurt. So kotouc. Yeah, and the accent is on the second part of the name, kotouc. Yeah. So this is how I tell it to people. Yeah.
Oh yeah, see, I would have butchered that. I would have said something like Jan Kotak. I would not have got that right at all.
Yeah, that's typical. Yeah, that's why I learned to do the explanation kot and ouch, and people get that.
So we're here today to talk about the Frontiers of the Imperium series. And is that your only
Yeah.
series, or do you do other stuff in Czech? And yeah, tell me a little bit about you and your other work.
Yeah. No, I have three series and one standalone, but it's my only series in English. I am I'm a fairly established writer in the Czech Republic. Have I think 16 titles out by now, and I have basically three main series. One is finished. It's been like similar to this like space opera military SF, and then I have a alternate history series which is about like alternate 1940s with Czech and Slovak kingdom fighting it off on the high seas with Tsarist Russia and roughly World War II era technology. So that's my bestseller. And now here this last series is Frontiers of the Imperium, which is my I would say newest series and the only one that's out in English. Uh,
Yeah, that kind of precludes me from any of your other work. As much as I would love to be bilingual, I am not.
yeah, Yeah, I know, and of course, it wouldn't be real logical for you to start learning Czech as your first second language. Like most Americans, you go for French or Spanish for obvious reasons.
Well, I would actually really love to learn Japanese. I just have not gotten around to doing it yet, but I love the culture and I'd love to learn the
Yeah,
language.
hmm yeah, in Japan, yeah, because I like military history, so I can do Japanese naval ranks in Japan, but in Japanese language, so that's about as far as I can go. And I watched like four animes in my life or five animes in my life, and I like them all, but I didn't watch all of them.
Oh yeah, see, I'm an anime nut. I've probably watched several dozen at least. I love anime. So, all right, man. Let's get to the questions. Get this underway. So, I wanted to ask about you. You have two pretty unique alien races, as I see it, and I really enjoyed them as far as sci-fi races go. And I wanted to hear about your inspiration for the Protectors and the Silmani.
I think I I think most authors do take inspiration from someone who came before them, but I think for Silmani, I really like the idea of alien race with three sexes, and I think, of course, it's not original idea in science fiction, but God no. And for example, there was like a Star Trek episode with that issue, and there was like zillion other authors, and I thought like, well, what if these aliens um, would be a victims of like some genetic attack where they would kill off one of their whole genders because they would target the specific enzyme the intermediate like gender is carrying, and these aliens are not really good in in like biological or life sciences, they are like more technocratic. So they, if it's not a big starship, they cannot work with that. So they don't know how to fix this problem. So they basically start surviving as like people nomading among the stars and being hired as either mercenaries or basically shipping companies. And yeah, and as for their thought processes, I think this is basically similar. I think they need to be really structured and have a strict hierarchy. And uh, I don't think I've described anything from the Silmani point of view. I don't, even in the later books, I don't think I've done that. But because it's sometimes it's easier to let the readers imagine the details of inner workings of the aliens. But I think these people, they are needed to adapt to survive a lot. So they have a strict hierarchy. They cannot have 20 people arguing what to do. So that's why when we have this twist at the end of book one with the Silmani, they just obey orders because that's what they are drilled to do to in order to survive as a species, you know. And and as for the protectors, I think, well, first I think it would be cool to have them like a giant caterpillars with sort of slightly telekinetic abilities. And I think it's just, I imagine them as aliens that are obsessed with order, like some, like, you know, we all have some, this one relative that is really obsessed with cleaning up all the time. So I think someone as a whole alien species like that, and they don't reproduce that much. So there's like only about 20,000 of them, which is why it was so easy to basically wipe them out. And and they are obsessed with order. So what they want to control everything because they want to impose their idea of order everywhere. So that's the driving force for them. And and as for them using parts of their tissue as sort of symbionts to their followers, this is an idea. Of course, we have symbionts in some form in all kinds of science fiction. We have the Goa'ulds in Stargate series and the Trills in Star Trek. And I thought, well, let's make the symbiont different. Let's make it basically like a sort of tuned tumor or something like that. So it's you put something in your body and it's destroying you piece by piece, but it's in the meantime it grants you some extra powers like telekinesis or something like that. And the side effects can be all kinds of things. You know, some people can die outright, some people can be in constant pain and they consider it a blessing because it shows them how powerful they are. Some people can have like really dry skin or basically leprosis. And so it's like when you are taking some medication and you look at the possible side effects in the documentary and you can say, okay, I can have this, I can have this. So this is like similar process, you know. They and the people who are accept these symbionts, they just want to prove they're superior and they are willing to risk their life on, and that's why they call it superiority mark or something like that. Yeah.
All right. So next, I wanted to ask about you. You have in here a casual
Yeah.
thing where the robots are set to Bieber's voice by default, and it's obviously to mock him. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that. I absolutely love that, and I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, well, people either hate it or love this, you know. I
Yeah, I saw a review about the book actually, where some guy was ranting about how he hated it, and I was like, "But dude, it actually makes sense because in the future, Bieber's voice would no longer be protected by copyright, so they'd be able to use his voice for free. So it makes perfect sense that corporations would be using his voice for the default setting in the future. Like, it makes perfect sense."
yeah, yeah, and actually the main character's robot has then have a voice set to sound like Christopher Lee. And I think this is part of the mosaic that I also intentionally make robots look like these sort of 1950s golden age era sci-fi robots, and that's intentional because there is there's like a retro era in fashion. You know, of course there can be robots that look like humans. There are robots like that now. You know, in Singapore they have a robot receptionist, you know, who can ask you how are you, and she remembers what you've talked about last time, and then she can get angry. I don't know how that works, but she can get angry, and and so I think what people are doing in the 28th century is that they are sort of looking at the 20th to 21st century with sort of like this retro nostalgia, the same way as people in the Renaissance were looking at the antiquity time as and trying to emulate it with the architecture and everything, or the same as in 1970s there were lots of movies about the 1950s nostalgia like American Graffiti, and so and I was thinking, well, these things will happen in the future as well, and so I think they are just intentionally making robots looking more like the 1950s types of robots, because why not?
Yeah. So, my next question is about the gates and the issue with finding human brains to construct them and
Yeah.
build them. And it's a non-issue as I see it, because across an intergalactic empire like this, just the
Mhm.
people in prison for murder would be more than sufficient to maintain the gates. And so I wanted to ask: has crime and punishment changed in the future? So we much have a much lower prison population now. Explain why we're not just using murderers to fuel the gates.
Yeah. I'm actually going to disagree on with the numbers with you on a little bit. But first, I think the Central Imperium is one giant compromise. So it's the motto of the Imperium is "Don't rock the boat." You know, the civilization must continue. So it's like if one planet has a death penalty, the other planet does not have to have a death penalty. You know, it's something that every member planet decides on itself. You know, similar like people in Alabama can think one thing and people in Hawaii can think a different thing. You know, which you can see in the U.S. politics today. You know, so like Central Imperium is like something like that on steroids, and I was when I was thinking about let's do like just the people sentenced for murder, let's do that. And I looked at did some search and I realized, well, even in China, which is considered now as like the capital of death penalties, there are not that many people executed per year. Certainly not so much to build a gate, because you need 2 million people for one gate, and you need two gates, so you need 4 million people, and that large number of people is hard to come by, and and so and what the protectors did at the end of their rule is that, and it's actually lots of what I come from Czech Republic. We used to be Czechoslovakia. We used to have communism here, and lots of the totalitarian regimes, what they do to control their population is they invent a law that sort of everyone is slightly breaking, and then they choose who they're going to persecute, and that's something the protectors were doing at the end. So they're basically choosing like what they were choosing what who to do with the gate. And but yeah, sure, there are these issues, and I think the first emperor, the first human emperor, then says like, well, it's regardless, this is not ethical. And we have all the gates and we have more space now than we need, so we can figure it out, and we can figure out to do the nerves by cloning, like to clone just the nerves and not the whole person, because if you clone the whole person, the ethical dilemma stands because it's a human being. And and but yeah but actually this is an issue I want to explore in one of the another book from the series I want to plan to write, sort of like a side story, where not everyone is happy with the how the gates were, with how the debate was going, and they plan to do something about it. And it's one project I'm actually preparing to work on.
Yeah, when I was doing my looking up, I was going by the people in prison for murder and other really serious crimes that I deemed to be worthy of death. So, that's how I was going
Yeah,
by
sure,
that.
but
But I agree. Yeah, if you went by executions, yeah, there would be nowhere near enough. There would be nowhere near enough people. You're right.
yeah, and as I said, not every planet has a death penalty. They have a they can just give you lots of drugs and make you some nice liable factory worker or whatever. And
I think that might be worse than death.
yeah, well, I think they had like lots of alternatives. I think in Babylon 5, they have like this death of personality that they just erase your memory and program a new personality, someone who is willing to swipe the streets or something like that, and just be happy working for the community. And
Yeah, that reminds me of this new show that's out. It's supposed to be a parody of Star Trek, but I don't remember what it's called right
or,
now.
or I think the show is called Orwell.
Yeah, that's it. You're right. That is it. Thank you. All right. So, next question. Uh the poker the poker in the story was a cool aspect for me. And the poker game between Dan and Gila is where the story got interesting for me. That's where I really started to enjoy reading. And I enjoyed the constant references to poker and the use of poker metaphors. And so, what made you throw that in? Are you a poker player? I'm curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love poker. I actually like was aware of the game. I played it in the past, and I haven't played for some years. And I said, let's make this hero a poker player. When I was designing Daniel, and I one way for it was that I wanted Daniel to be someone who can really look at people and figure out really fast what makes them tick, and which is a good both for intelligence officer and for poker player. and and I like Ian Fleming James Bond books. And James Bond has the ability, the book Bond. In the movies, it's often not clearly seen, but he has this offer. And in the books, there are really nice scenes with Bond playing, of course, Shoes de Fer or Baccarat or Canasta or Bridge. And I said, well, I don't know these games that much, and so let's do poker. And and so actually, while writing these books, I got back into poker, and I have this app on my cell phone again, and I was watching some of these like pro players on YouTube videos, and actually in book two there is a big poker tournament, which is a, and in a casino which I named Obrestadt, and the Obrestadt casino is named after Annette Obrestadt, who is I think she was one of the youngest winners of World Series of Poker. She won it when she day before her 19th birthday, and she was like the prodigy savant child. And it was more than 10 years ago, and I realized recently that she stopped playing poker, and I dropped her an email. She has a YouTube channel now with I think she makes reviews of Las Vegas hotels or something like that. And so I dropped her an email. If hi, I'm sci-fi writer. I named the casino after you. Do you mind? And she replied, no, 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 not at all. Enjoy. And I said, oh, thank you. And so, yeah, so I like poker. I enjoy the poker, and I enjoy this scene. And as a from a storyteller point of view, I also like to ask the question, okay, how to make this different? Because it's like a space opera with some military aspects, but it's like adventure in space. How to make it different? And so I thought this poker thing would be really interesting. Of course, we have no way to predict what games would people play in 700 years, but it's chess are more than 1,000 years old, and people are still playing chess. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, people absolutely love poker. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People are probably going to be playing poker every bit as long as it goes into your book, and I mean because it's
yeah.
humans love gambling, and poker seems to be a favorite medium. Yeah, man, people love poker.
Yeah. And by the way, when I was looking for a translator to translate these books into Czech, my translator Isabel, I sent her the first poker scene as a sample, and it was really difficult for her because she was from very anti-gambling family. So I, but she managed, and I actually decided to. I chose her as the translator from the several applications because she just did a great job and she knew when to ask. And so sometimes she asks about poker terminology, and I say like, what is big blind, what is small blind, what is straight, what is flush, and all these things. Yeah.
So my next question is, you this book is written in multi POV. You've got a lot of POVs in here. I mean, you have some POVs that you introduce and kill them off the next chapter. I mean, you have a lot of
Okay, point of view,
perspectives,
yeah.
and so point of view, yeah, and so
Hmm.
the constant jumping around was jarring for me, and it made some of my some
Yeah,
of it hard to
that
follow, and it made it hard to get attached to specific characters and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask why you chose to write the story in so many POVs.
okay. Well, I think this is actually pretty simple because all my favorite authors write like that, and I think every author in the end we start with writing stories we ourselves would like to read if they were written by someone else. And as I think I've told you in the email, or maybe I didn't, that I probably one of the author who has the greatest influence on my writing is David Weber, and he's the author of the Honor Harrington series, the Save Hold series, and a zillion other series. And he has much more than five POV characters, maybe more, certainly more than 10, maybe more than 20. And yeah, and so I just like series like and books like that, and especially with it's like with movies, very seldom movies with this type of stories follow just one character because you have cuts and you see what the bad guys are doing and something like that. And I see it in my head as the movie. And
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mention the scene in your head like a movie because I actually do that too. I just don't jump around to a bunch of perspectives. That's kind of interesting. I just stick with the perspective I write or the maybe one or two, but I never jump around to as many as you do.
I think the ability to tell the story or to explain the scene from many perspectives. And so, yeah, I can avoid like this exploring for example, the attack on the mushroom planet Lundin, or the not mushroom, but the moss planet Lundin in the middle of this book. I can avoid like telling it from the point of view of the attacker, but it tells me something more about the dynamic of the people who are attacking, and like what their relationships are, how they're cloning the soldiers to be basically their cannon fodder. It tells me something about it. And when I write, for example, my alternate history series, I write it as a sort of alternate history of World War II or something like that. And if you look at World War II, and for example you want to talk about, I don't know, the invasion of Normandy, you can have a point of view character of someone who is landing on the beaches, someone who is jumping out of the airplane, someone who is manning the gun on the big battleship near the shore, and what the German commander is doing. And it's more complex and more interesting for you to tell the story. Of course, if you have a movie about it, you can have a movie about Tom Hanks landing on the beach, and that's great. But if you want, but that's assuming that most people have at least the general idea what the invasion of Normandy was about. But if I invent a completely new battle for the book, it's better to have like the complex mosaic so people have better idea what's going on. Yeah.
I definitely see that. That definitely makes sense. And I see the value in it. I would just probably personally cut it off sooner so I didn't have so many because, like I said, it's hard for me to follow. But, to each their own. For some people, I know some people really like that. Yeah, my mom really likes that, for example. So, next, there's quite a bit of uh, telling and exposition, and it's usually framed as characters thinking, having an internal monologue, and sometimes I feel like it's a bit much on a few occasions. And so I wanted to ask, did you do that as a way of getting in all your world building, or was this to try to give insight into characters? I want to hear about that.
Partially, again, some authors I like to read, they do it and much higher amount that I do. And as I said, I love David Weber's works, but he can have a what he calls info dumps for pages and pages and pages about the history and galactic, how the star travel was developed and everything. And it can be pages, and you can just tell David is a historian. And I still love his works. David, if you are watching this, I love your work. But um, but it's lots of it, and sometimes it's necessary. What I try to do, and not it's not always possible, but what I try to do is that um, I write the internal monologue in a scene where it's logical for the character to think about this thing. Like when I tell you don't think about elephants, you start thinking about elephants. So this is the way I do it. And once some with Frontiers of the Imperium, I tried to do also something else, and I had this big briefing scene where they explain lots of the background in the form of a guy giving briefing to the crew of the ship, and I actually asked some of my friends who are or were in the military about how these briefings work, because like if you are, for example, a soldier or a marine or sailor and you are get deployed to some country in the Middle East, you need to have a long briefing about local customs, what you should do off base, what you shouldn't do. And they all told me things like, yeah, it's long, boring, and no one wants to go to these briefings. So that's how I wrote it. That's why someone is throwing a paper airplane there, or someone belches really loudly. Yeah, and so it was a total exposition scene, but I thought it would be better than to just write internal monologue. So this was my experiment, like do a big briefing scene. But yeah, it's of course it has its challenges to write a first book in a completely new universe. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I once had a manuscript critiquer tell me that my one paragraph of exposition was too much. I was irate. I was like, one paragraph.
Yeah.
Like, come on!
You know,
I'm building an entire world here. One paragraph of exposition is too much. I was storming through my house ranting about it. But anyways, my next question is about the dialogue and kind of how it relates to the internal
mhm,
monologues and all that stuff. I wanted to ask,
mhm.
like, it feels like a bit stiff. Like, was that a deliberate choice, or was that because you're not an English speaking native? Was something lost in translation?
um, I mean, like that everyone's. I'm not sure what you're exactly asking. Is that every character seemed to you that they have the same speech pattern?
Not so much that they had the same speech pattern, more so just that a lot of them felt stiff. Like there was just something off. I felt like to someone like
Yeah.
me who's a native English speaker, there was
Yeah.
just something a little bit stiff about the dialogue. That's really the best way I can put it. And so I wanted to ask about that. Like, was that deliberate? What gives with that?
I uh, uh, I don't really know when I was writing this in Czech. Of course, I never. What I don't do is that some of the writing workshops, and I've been teaching some writing workshops as well. They say that make every character speak distinctly, and I don't really follow that much, because if you have same people from the same neighborhood, from the same background, of course they're going to speak the same. And since many of my characters in the book are military, they're going to use the same frame of reference. So it will be ridiculous to make one stutter and the other using the F word every second sentence or whatever. So that as for yeah, I know that in my writing I don't usually use lots of that much slang, either Czech or in English. Isabel translated this into English, but I've read it also and gave it my stamp of approval. So it's been it's how well, actually I think Isabel improved some of the speech, and because I'm not sure how much it's seen more in book two, but in book one, you probably remember the character of Arun Sarkar, the guy who is in charge of the Scottish fanboys regiment, and he is a his ethnicity is he's from India, but he basically is like a Scottish fanboy. And my translator lives in Scotland, and so what she did was she took it one step further and she had him speak Scottish. And every time I was like rereading this, I'm like looking at, oh, is this a typo? Oh no, he's speaking Scot. So and
Yeah, I remember that bit of line where it's like Scott isn't a nationality, it's a mindset.
yeah, and it's 100% true. I'm like, as my translator confirms to me. And so yeah, I know that there are some writers who are like planning dialogues, like they're writing outline for dialogues. I when I write outline, I'm like, I know what they're going to talk about, but I'm more or less letting them do it their own way. I'm an outliner. I'm a plotter, but I write usually like a bullet points, what's going to happen then and what's going to happen next. But I don't bullet point like dialogues, like, and then he mentions this and then she mentions that. I don't do that. But again, I know at least one author who is doing that, and she is a very successful author. And but if you probably heard Lois McMaster Bujold and her Miles Vorkosigan series, she is writing dialogues like that, from what I understand. And it's super successful series that runs since the has been running since the 80s. Yeah, well, it's like a ongoing series, and well, I'm not sure it's ongoing. It's most of the books are like episodic, and but I think the series is not finished technically. She says she's semi-retired now, so she may write the next book if she feels like it. But you don't feel like left in the middle of something. Like every book is has a beginning, middle, and an end. So
So, about the twist at the end with the Salmani
mhm.
and the and
Yeah.
Daniel, I really enjoyed that. That was a good twist. And I wanted to know if that was the plan all
Uh-huh.
along because it for a lot of it it felt like the thing with Dan was being deliberately avoided. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to know if that was what you were planning to do all along or if you changed your mind at some point and switched.
That was the plan the whole time. Like, and when I first came up with this, it was like, yeah, let's make, okay, spoiler alert, let's make a series about the guy who's like emperor in exile, which is the title of the second book, like guy who is like the emperor and just cut off, and doing this. And I think it's slightly a red herring when I mentioned like he is like number, I think he was number 9 in the succession. and then I said, well, if we said that he was number 2 in the succession, then you have just one person to kill, and that's it. But but number 9, it's like, yeah, well, and so he's more probably like somewhere around the where Prince Andrew is in the British royal family or something like that. And, yeah, but I like this like succession, or the I'm not sure how it's called in English, like chain of succession. Like it doesn't have to be with royal family. In the U.S. politics, you have the chain of succession. Like after president and vice president is the Speaker of the House, and then Speaker of the Senate, etc., etc., etc. So you have like the list of people, and so I like this thing, and it's and usually like we don't expect something like this to happen, but if we kill enough people, like everyone is like can become the emperor. And yeah, and I remember there's a nice scene in one in Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode where the Ferengi cadet in Starfleet, is addressing Dax commanding the Defiant, and he calls her commander, and they correct him that he says it's captain. Whoever commands the ship is captain. And he says, so you're saying that if I take command of the ship, I would be captain? And they say, by the time you take command of the ship, there'll be no one left aboard to go. And so Yes, I like this like procedure and successions, and it's actually like one hobby of mine to just go to Wikipedia and read about this stuff and etc. And so yeah, but and of course like it's fun to have monarchies in sci-fi. I don't know why people are interested, and it's not only me but other writers as well. And I just it just it sounds better if he would be like the ninth in the succession of the great nephew of the emperor than if he would be like, I don't know, secretary of agriculture or something like that. Yeah. And there's something else I want.
All right.
Oh,
And so my last question, the question that I always like to top off the interview with, is what question do you always get asked about this story that you just want to answer and have be on the record and be done with it so that you can refer people to this video and you're done with the question?
okay, the surprising number of people ask me about the NRs, the sort of like genetically enhanced sort of nobility in the Central Imperium, which was created by the protectors, and there are people who are basically functioning as the nobles but nobility based on something you can measure. And and they have like a higher average IQ, higher stamina and everything, but they also have because they have higher metabolism, they have higher average temperature, and they skip 3 meals and can go into hypoglycemic shock. So it's not all rosy. But what I mention in the book is that the NR gene is dominant. So NR person would always have NR children, and people keep asking me like, so why won't the Ener just populate the entire Central Imperium in the end anyway? And I explained to them that it's been just a few 100 years since the whole thing began, and they have no reason to do that because while there are some very promiscuous Eners, most of them just prefer to like have a few kids and be done with it. And but they're just, I think there are, in the book it says there are 86 surviving NR families, and the population of the Central Imperium is about, let's 90 populated planets, so let's say it's about between 70 and 100 billion people, and versus 86 families. So even if they wanted to do this, it would take them thousands of years to do that. So yeah, and so I think this is, it may be an issue like 1,000 years down the line, but since the Enners are more like getting less and less power, and of course, and since there are also drawbacks of being Enners, like really you need to eat regularly or otherwise you are in big trouble. Then not people may want to, and even the Enners themselves, the nobles, you don't want to have. If you are a noble, you don't want to make everyone else in the universe a noble because then you lose all your privilege. Like so many people were asking me, and I had one biologist who said that you don't know it's like biologically impossible for the gene to be dominant 100%. And I said, well, apparently this protector designed gene is dominant 100%. Let's leave it at that. Yeah, well, no, I'm actually very happy because I think this was pointed out to me by a friend who is she's my scientist geek, and she also writes great science fiction, publishes lots of stuff in English. Her name is Julia Novakova. And hi, Julia. I'm making an advert for you here. And she's one of my go-to people for when I need to have some scientific issue tackled in my books. So especially concerning biology, because she's a biologist. I can introduce you with Julia.
All right, sir. Well,
Yeah.
it's about that time. So, end of video plug. Where can people find you and your work?
Okay, yeah, you can of course find me on Amazon. You type my name, you can find me. I have my website, which is jan kotouc.cz, and if we publish this video, we can put it in the comments below or something like that. And yeah, and of course I'm on Goodreads. I'm not active there. I have a Facebook page, and which is like just my name and a page. Uh, and so you can find me there. My website are now down due to maintenance because we've moved the server around, but by the time this video comes out, it should be online as well already as well. So
Well, all right, sir. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you putting up with my hardball
No,
questions,
yeah.
and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Likewise, they were completely fine. You know, I've, after reading some of my Chick reviews, I've developed a pretty thick skin. Your questions were absolutely okay. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. It was a real pleasure to be here.